On September 3rd in 1986, the Missoula Mauler, Wayne Nance, set out to murder his next victims in Montana. Doug and Kris Wells had hired Wayne a few months earlier as a delivery man for their furniture store, and over time, his infatuation and his obsession with Kris grew. He'd already murdered 3 unidentified women over the past decade, souls he'd stolen who the police and press had named Debbie Deer Creek, Christy Crystal Creek, and Betty Beavertail. Wayne held on to their belongings long after he'd slit their throats, gloating in his demonic power and psychotic control over them. Wayne had begun stealing items like jewelry and underwear from the Wells' home, and he'd created a photo album with pictures of Kris jogging or shopping for him to obsess over every night. All that was left to do was kill Doug, have his way with Kris, and then kill her too, so that he could possess her soul until his death, at which point he planned to drag all of the women that he'd murdered to hell with him. This is the story of real evil versus the power of true love and an actual account of hell on earth. It's also a potent reminder. There is so much more to reality and existence to be experienced than what meets the eyes. Or as Hamlet said, there are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy. This is Doug's story. The day started like any other as the sun rose over the Rocky Mountains, casting pink and purple hues into the morning sky. The warm, nutty smell of coffee filled the kitchen as bacon and eggs sizzled in cast iron, and I recall looking out the window as a sense of awe fell over me. Kris and we were so lucky to live in such a gorgeous place. We'd often joked that it was like we died and gone to heaven. And before a typical Wednesday at the furniture store began, I felt Kris wrap her arms around my waist and kiss me on my neck. "I love you," she whispered. It was and had always been just the two of us. We were in our mid-30s, the prime of our life, and most days we were left in awe by the angelic nature that surrounded us. Our home was on a private land. It was tucked away in our own secluded paradise, surrounded by trees and mountains. How in the world had we gotten so lucky? Life, it seemed, had blessed us. That evening, we went out with some friends for dinner and drinks, and Kris and we slow danced to a few songs before calling it a night. On the ride home, Kris cuddled up against the window and fell asleep, and I periodically glanced at my short-haired brunette petite wife with adoration as I drove through the late summer night. Peter Cetera's Glory of Love played softly on the radio, and for some reason, the lyrics hit me harder than they ever had before. I am a man who will fight for your honor, and I'll be the hero that you're dreaming of. We'll live forever, knowing together that we did it all just for the glory of love. And as I pulled into our driveway, Kris woke up, and we both saw this white Ford Transit camper van sitting right outside of our house. "Who is that?" she asked just before yawning. "I don't know," I said, "but you go to bed, okay? I'll check it out. I'm sure it's nothing." The moon was waning towards dark, so it was hard to peer inside the vehicle as I approached it, and I figured it must be some traveler who pulled off to sleep, and sure enough, when I was close enough, I saw a man with a baseball cap covering his eyes. Weird as it was, I headed towards the house. Once inside, I couldn't help but start gathering the garbage to take it out, scratching my neat freak itch. I opened the door and I walked onto the lawn towards the garbage, and that's when I saw it. The dark silhouette of a man in a baseball cap standing right in front of me. He took me by surprise. I jumped back a little before asking, "Can I help you with something?" "Doug, it's me. It's Wayne," he said. "I hired this guy a few months earlier to work at the store, and as it turned out, he'd been driving by when he saw a man looking through our windows. And Wayne claimed to drive in to try and spook him, but he said he couldn't find him. And so he decided to stay, and then he fell asleep while he was waiting for the intruder to show up again or for us to return home. And I was relieved. I was grateful. I thanked him, and he said that he'd like to give it one more look if I had a flashlight that he could borrow. I consented, and I let him inside. There are these moments of duality in life, and they come on without warning, and they shock you to your very core. In my mind, this was a good Samaritan. He was an employee who genuinely cared about me and Kris's safety, and I could have lived another 30 years believing that people are intrinsically good. But that was not what fate had in store for me that night. Once the door closed behind Wayne, I started to turn and to tell him wait there while I got the light. And that's when it happened. Bam! He hit me in the back of my head with something hard, and I fell forward, landing flat on the linoleum, sending a bolt of dizzying electricity through my forehead. And in a few seconds, lying on the floor, the atmosphere eerily shifted. The smell of afternoon coffee still clung in the air, but now it was mixed with that metallic sense of blood oozing from the back of my head, and the feel of heaven. In our home, it disappeared in an instant. It felt like an invisible door to hell had been ripped wide open. The silent demon grabbed my legs and began dragging me stomach down towards the hallway. He pulled me past the console table that held me and Kris's wedding photos. I couldn't see them, but I felt them like a bolt of lightning in my chest. No, I said to myself as I visualized Kris's face. I had to protect her. I flipped onto my back and I lunged forward to tackle Wayne by the legs. He fell to his knees and I tried to wrestle him to the ground. And when I looked into his eyes, they were pitch black. I immediately felt that temperature in the room drop to freezing. The hair on the back of my neck stood straight up as I realized this was living, breathing evil. His body was ice cold, and as I tried my best to push him to the ground, my body chilled from the inside out. It was like I'd been transported into another dimension. It was my house, but not my house. I could smell something putrid wafting through the gates of some twisted underworld, and I saw Wayne's mouth curl into something, the most disturbing grin that I'd ever seen, just before he hit me square in the face with a metal pole. Everything went dark for a few moments as I heard the most horrific laughter rumbling like thunder in my ears. And that's when I knew it. Hell was real, and we were in it. Suddenly, I heard the stairs above me creaking. I knew it was Kris. She was coming to check on me, and I heard her gasp and shriek, "Wayne, what are you doing?" Wayne grabbed a pistol from the back of his pants and he pointed it at her. And then he pointed it at me. And in this creepy, calm voice, he said, "Kris, tie him up, or I'll shoot him in the head." And then he threw a cord on the floor and watched with that disturbing grin as Kris quickly looped it around my wrists across my stomach. And I knew that if I didn't will myself to stay awake, I could lose consciousness at any moment. I could barely mumble back after Kris whispered it into my ear, "Hang in there, baby." Seeing her bright blue eyes simultaneously filled me with both hope and dread. He wanted her. He was there for her. My angel, my darling. I looked up at that monster who was now holding my wife roughly by her arm, and without realizing it, the word "why" pushed through the last bit of air in my lungs and out of my mouth. And Wayne looked down at me with rage in his eyes. And without warning, he retrieved a knife from his belt and slammed it into my right upper chest, and he yanked it out as blood spurted out of me. And just before going unconscious, I heard him flatly reply, "Because I can." I drifted into a nightmare as the faint sounds of my wife's screams vanished into time and space, and I found myself engulfed in flames and my body sizzling at the center of a massive bonfire. And I was screaming at the top of my lungs as evil black souls danced around my burning flesh. And even amidst my cries, the smell of sulfur and smoke burnt my nostrils. And just before waking up, Wayne's true face appeared over me. It was a black, leather charcoal mess of skin, bubbling like lava amidst two burning eyes. And he curled his lips up into that wicked smile once again, and I lunged upward out of sleep with a yelp. I looked around. I was in the basement. Wayne must have come back and dragged me down the stairs. The house was quiet. It was too quiet. So I immediately feared the worst. I had to get to Kris, but something seemed to be happening outside in the early morning hours. I could hear the wind slamming against the house like elemental spirits. They were telling me, "Get up, get up, get up." The next thing I knew, this apparition of a snowy owl appeared just above me. It was flapping its gorgeous wings. It was hooting over and over again. It was glowing, bright white, with a halo of pink and gold above its head. It was breathtaking. And suddenly I recalled stories about the Kootenai tribe that had once lived on our land, and how the female shamans had formed the Crazy Owl Society. It was to ward off evil and disease. And this warm feeling suddenly was filling my chest, and I realized I was being assisted by those magical medicine women right now. I thought back on that devilish nightmare. I realized I visited hell, and it hadn't killed me. Something courageous and supernatural was right here. It was helping me. It was telling me it's time to save her. And in a flash, I began wriggling and racking my body to and fro to release myself from those knots that Kris had tied around my ankles and my wrists. And that's when I smiled as I discovered that she disguised these knots with what looked like tight ties. They were actually loose ones. My brilliant, heroic mountain woman was always thinking 3 steps ahead. I flung my body upward to standing position and I looked around. My grandfather's shotgun glimmered right there from a box in the corner, and suddenly I remembered his wise words from when I was a boy and the many times that he'd take me hunting. A hunter's greatest weapon is not his rifle, he'd say. It's knowing when he's become the prey. What you have on the predator, then, is that it expects its prey to run, not fight. So you do fight, my boy, he'd say. You fight with all your might. I reached for that shotgun and I loaded it with 3 cartridges from the box. And then I grabbed a rag and I tied it around my head to stop the bleeding, which allowed my vision to immediately become clearer. My chest was still dripping with blood, but somehow I felt invincible. Whatever that beast had done to Kris, I'd make sure he'd pay for it. Like a bird of night, I flew up the first flight of stairs, aided by a sense of righteousness and justice. And then I heard Kris screaming. I lunged up the second flight of stairs, knowing that this demon from hell would be up there waiting for me. And I met his red eyes right in the hallway. And for a split second, I was able to look through them into the diabolical netherworlds of his origin. And I saw blood and gore and terror. And then my instincts took over. I shot him in the chest. At the same time, his pistol let loose 2 shots, one of which hit me in the leg, and I unloaded the remaining 2 cartridges. One hit the wall, the other hit his stomach, but he wasn't dead. So I leapt towards him like some wild animal and I began bashing his head with the rifle. I hit him harder each time, bending the rifle until it turned into a U shape, and the pistol fell out of his hand, so I grabbed it. I pointed it at his head, and I took one more look into the devil's bloody eyes. "I'll see you in hell," he mumbled through broken teeth. "No, you won't," I said, and then I pulled the trigger. "It's over," I whispered as Kris rushed to my aid, herself covered in blood, and my body crumpled to the floor as a new day, a new sunrise, seeped through the windows. Colors of red and orange streamed in as I heard Kris calling 911. The light turned everything dark into vibrant colors, and I knew our heaven on earth had been restored. We would never be the same, and it would take a lot of healing, but we had fought against the very powers of hell and we had conquered it. Our love had reigned supreme, and we would live the rest of our days as warriors of spirit and light. Wayne Nance only lived a few miles from the Wells' home, and after his death, police found the driver's licenses of the 3 women he murdered, along with their possessions. And in the basement of his home, that's where they discovered a secret door behind a shelf that opened to a hallway and a small room. It was ice cold and it smelled like sulfur. Wayne had painted it all red and drawn disturbing, hellish images on the wall with markers. It is said to be haunted by the torture of his victims and his disturbing evil. And over the years, people who visit the Wells' home have gotten glimpses of snowy owls, either real or as images in the clouds. This incredible power of the female Kootenai shamans protects that land to this day. Wayne Nance's evil was stopped that night, but the question remains: What forces brought him to the Wells home to begin with? Was it pure obsession, or was it something darker, pulling the strings? Have you ever experienced a moment where you felt a battle between good and evil in your own life? Please share your thoughts in the comments below with us. And if you'd like to hear more of these true stories of supernatural encounters with evil, subscribe and tap that notification bell. The darkness, it's always waiting, but so are the snowy owls. We'll see you in the next video.